Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me for the discussion on the Variances tab of the course project. So I want to point out as we get started that this particular tab is worth 12 points. And the scenario is that it is April 1st, 2023. You're excited about your future prospects. You created budgets 3 months ago, and that's what you guys did last week. But now we need to measure our actual cost and volume against our budgets. You decide to evaluate your direct materials and your direct labor variances to measure actuals against the first quarter budgets. Now, I want to point that out. It's the first quarter budgets. So as you're walking through all of these calculations, make sure that you're only looking at that first quarter. So we have a table below right here that depicts the actuals for the first quarter. So you'll use this as well. And let's see. So now we're going to perform direct materials and direct labor evaluations, and then we're going to discuss what might be causing these variances. But before we get started, let's go ahead and open up the digital textbook, and I have mine open. Let me just click on it. And so I am in the variances section. We're going to perform 4 different variance analysis. One is, I'm going to scroll down. One is the direct labor rate variance. And here is your formula. Another is your direct labor time variance. And here is the formula that you're going to use. I'm going to go back one page. And this is our direct materials variance. I'm going to scroll down. You have your direct materials price variance. And again, you have your formula here. And you have your direct materials quantity variance. And that's right here. You're going to use these 4 formulas for this next tab. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video, write these formulas down because you're going to be using these in all of the calculations. All right. I'm going to navigate back over to our spreadsheet. And so you do see them here. You have our direct materials price variance, direct materials quantity variance. You have direct labor rate variance, and we're actually going to calculate this individually for the bakers, decorators, and packers. And then we're going to do the same thing for the direct labor time variance. All right. So again, before we get started, let's just talk about why we even perform variance analysis. So basically, the variance analysis is considered a monitoring device. So what we're monitoring is the company's effectiveness in controlling material cost, material waste, labor rates, and then idle labor, people not actually working when they should be working. Our standards that we're going to use are going to come from our budget tab. And the operating budget is established months before the actual operating budget begins. So if the operating budget begins on January 1st, we establish the operating budget probably 3 months before. Our standards are influenced by shocks to the economy, changes in technology, and even the level of preventive maintenance that we use for our equipment. For this project, though, our standards are going to come from the budget tab. And our actual costs are going to come from the table on the left side of this particular spreadsheet. As we walk through these formulas, please be cognizant of the mathematical order of operations. And by this, I mean pay a little bit of attention to the parentheses. So missing the parentheses can actually make a huge difference, and we can kind of see that right here. If I say I have 1 plus 5 times 5, or if I use parentheses and say 1 plus 5 times 5. This is actually going to give me two different answers. So let me just put this into a formula. That gives me 26. And that gives me 30. So there is a difference. So pay attention to the parentheses as we walk through these formulas. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So with your direct materials price variance, go ahead and go back to your textbook to see what the formula was for that. And while you do that, I'm going to start typing it in. So it is the actual price minus your standard price. And we're going to multiply that by our actual quantity. There we go. So where are we going to get this from? Well, we mentioned that our actuals are here on this side, and our standards are going to be on our budget tab. So I'm going to click on the budget tab. Our standards are going to be here. Now, on your particular budget tab, all of this is going to be filled out. This one is blank, so we're going to make up some numbers when we get to that particular section, okay? Okay, so what is my direct materials price variance? What is the actual price for our direct materials? I'm going to scroll down to the materials actuals, and we're actually going to use the unit cost. So you could use total, but we're going to use that unit cost. And I'm going to link all of my information so that it makes it a little bit easier to track. So again, my equal sign, putting my parentheses in, and I'm going to pick up my unit price. That's my actual. I'm going to subtract my budget price, or I'm sorry, my standard cost. And so now I'm over here, I'm in my materials budget again, and I'm going to get my price per dozen. And remember, I did say choose your first quarter, and your first quarter price per dozen should be here. I'm going to close up my parentheses, and I'm going to multiply that by my actual quantity. So our actual quantity that we produced is right here. Those are our production actuals, 38,204. So I'm going to scroll up so that we can see the formula. And there we go. We have our actuals. We subtracted out our standard price, and we multiplied it by the actual quantity. This gives me an answer of 153 and some change. Now, that doesn't feel right, does it? Mainly because I know that my actual price was a little lower than my standard. And that's because on my budget tab, I didn't enter a number. So I'm going to make up a number. I'm going to say that my price per dozen was $6 per unit. And again, I'm making that number up. So if it doesn't match what you have on your budget tab, then that's good. As I come back over, now I see that my answer is negative. So my actual price is lower than my standard price. Is that favorable or unfavorable? Well, it's favorable. And now what does this tell us? What does this variance tell us? Because remember, we're not doing these variance analysis just to, do some analyses. These analyses should tell us something about how efficient we are, how effective we are. And so what this is really telling us is that we have controlled our materials price quite well. So we controlled material price well Ooh, spell right. During this period. Okay, so you'll do the same thing for your direct materials quantity variance, and you'll also do the same for your direct labor rate variance and your labor time variance. But the rate and the time variance are going to be done a little bit different. Instead of summing up everything here as one formula, you are going to perform the calculations here. And again, I'm going to make up some numbers. Let's just say this is 4,000, and this one ends up being a negative 1,000, and then this one equals, 700. So you have all of these calculations for each one of the categories. At the very top, you're going to sum these three items up. And again, I just made up these numbers, so your answer is probably going to be quite different. Here is where you're going to tell us what this, or you're going to write down what this tells us. Did we control our direct labor rate well with us spending 3,700 more than we had projected? Same thing with time variance. This is how productive your workforce is, or how idle your workforce is. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.